What's going on, everyone? In today's episode, I'm going to share with you some things that you can do if you have compacted soil that can still allow you to not only have a garden, but have a great one. Let's go. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about soil, because soil is the foundation of a healthy garden. And if you don't have good quality soil, your plants are going to suffer. Now, compacted soil at its core isn't always bad soil. I think it's a really common misconception. Prime example would be something like clay soil. Clay soil, when it's compacted, can be bad for plants, but clay soil at face value can be a wonderful resource to any garden. Even ours. Our garden has a lot of clay content in it, believe it or not. And the clay provides so many minerals. Those minerals, once unlocked, can actually help to feed your plants and give them so many micronutrients that they wouldn't otherwise have. And it really helps them to be incredibly healthy. So compacted soil is just a product of having small particle size. It has nothing to do with the overall quality of the soil. So in our soil here, we have, like I said, a good amount of clay. And even though we've used lots of compost in this bed right here, over time, the compost breaks down, the particle size gets smaller, and it allows things to kind of compact closer together, causing that compaction, despite the fact that it is beautiful. Yes, there is some clay content, but as you can see, it's nice and dark, because over 7 or 8 years of us having this garden here, we've put a lot of compost in here, and all of that has broken down, but over winter and throughout the growing season, things kind of get a little bit compacted. And so if you have compacted soil, don't think that your soil is bad. First rule. Second rule is there's things that you can do to improve that so you actually can have a garden. All right, so the first thing you do to actually break up your compacted soil is to add more compost. By mulching with compost, what it's going to do is actually going to encourage worms to come up through your soil. And worms are what we call nature's rototiller. And so a lot of times, no-dig gardens, right? No-till gardens, we always talk about layering and how we just layer more organic material on top of the beds. But I know that for those that want an immediate garden, that isn't always the most practical approach, because if you start with a piece of just native ground, might be your yard, might be a field or whatever, you're not necessarily going to have great soil right off the bat. And if you put compost right on top of that, or sometimes people use wood chips, they take a long time to break down and help to soften that soil. And if you want to first your garden right off the bat, it's not super practical. So what you can also use is you can use a rototiller and combine that with something like gypsum. Now, gypsum is great because gypsum helps to actually get in between, if you have heavier clay soil, helps to get in between the clay particles and break them up. It actually breaks up the chemical bond of the clay, because believe it or not, clay has a chemical bond, and that's what allows it to be nice and tight. And so if you can kind of loosen that up a little bit, it will fluff your soil, and despite you not adding any compost at all, can really help to loosen it. Now again, everything does take time, but it can allow you to at least have a garden your first year. Now, what I would suggest doing is kind of a hybrid approach. So we're applying some gypsum to this soil right here to help to loosen up the clay, but we're also going to follow up, because we have access to it, with some compost. There's no reason why you shouldn't implement some type of compost to your garden, especially if you're rototilling, because what you're going to do is you're going to incorporate that native soil, which is more compacted and hardened, and might be lesser quality, with some very high quality compost and organic material and this gypsum to make it very homogeneous. So it's one soil rather than a bunch of different things in your soil, which is really going to help. So the next way you can have an absolutely amazing garden still while having compacted soil is by using the compacted soil to your benefit. Now, the Minnesota State University ran a study where they essentially used the hard pan, which is compacted soil, and they utilized the hard pan essentially as a planting trough. And in that planting trough, they had about 5 to 6 inches of shallow tilled soil. And so what they said is that using a shallow tilling approach with hard pan underneath can actually be a great benefit for those that cannot deeply till their soil, with crops that have an extensive spreading root system. An example of an extensive spreading root system would be something like cotton, or in our case in a vegetable garden, tomatoes, peppers, anything that has wiry roots that move throughout the garden to try to find nutrients and water. An example of something that would not do well would be like carrots, right? The carrots, they have a taproot that goes down in a nice conical shape, and if you have clay or compacted soil, it's going to bend and it's going to twist and you're going to get really messed up carrots. But for something like tomatoes or peppers, you can have an incredibly successful garden utilizing the hard pan. And what they found was, so this is hard pan, right? So there's a layer of loose soil on top. In our garden right here, this is no editing. There's only maybe about 1 inch of soil that I can rake away, okay? We need at least 5 to 6 inches. 5 to 6 inches of loose soil, and then below that is going to be this. It's going to be hard pan. And what they found is that hard pan, as long as you have about 5 to 6 inches of loose soil on top, whether that's through bringing in compost or whether that's through, loosely rototilling. I'm using my rake as a rototiller and essentially breaking up and uncompacting and loosening that top 5 to 6 inches of soil. What it's going to do is when you get rain, when you fertilize, all of the rain and the fertilizer, all of that stays within a zone that the plants can actually reach and access. That is awesome. Now, I'm by no means saying that you should intentionally have compacted soil. They did outline a lot of negative downsides, such as when you have a shallow root system, because the roots are not going to be encouraged to move down through the hard pan, they're going to be encouraged to move out shallowly in the soil. They're going to move out very aggressively and have more access to the water and nutrients that are there. The problem is, due to the shallow soil bed, it's going to evaporate a whole lot faster, and overall the plants are going to have a less kind of sturdy root system, meaning they're more likely to topple over in strong winds and things like that. So there are some negatives, don't get me wrong, it's not all positives. I'm simply trying to help you find a silver lining with compacted soil, because so many people have compacted soil, they struggle to loosen their soil, or they wait so long until their soil is loosened that they give up on so many precious years of having an amazing garden. So what we're trying to do is try to get you out into the garden and have some type of garden rather than have no garden at all. So I just spent a couple minutes here just kind of working the soil with the tines of the rake here. And what we've got here is a really well broken up, very friable soil. Friability is how loose and fluffy your soil is. Now, the great thing with this is the fact that we also have the hard pan underneath, which is going to help us if we can't loosen all the soil all at once, right? So if we rake this back, we're going to find is, here we go. So you're noticing I'm not able to get much more soil. This right here, this is the hard pan. Check this out. So this right here, this is this hard layer where you're not going to get a lot of root penetration, but what's awesome is that when this is pushed back, when this is all pushed back, what you're going to have is you're going to have a planting bed that your roots are going to stay very shallow. But again, we're shallowly tilling to aerate that top layer of soil. We're going to hopefully incorporate things like gypsum and compost into that top layer, really amend it nice and fertile. But our plants are going to have access to so much more of those nutrients, because one thing that happens when you have really loose soil is you lose a lot of nutrients due to leaching. And basically leaching is where the nutrients, they flow through the soil because everything drains so well that the nutrients leave your plant roots, and your plant roots are up here and the nutrients are down here, and you end up having to refertilize. And so there's kind of pros and cons to everything, but like I said, you're going to find that with this you are going to have to water more, so prepare for that. And if you do this, you are also going to have a more likely to topple over plant. So consider heavier duty stakes, some type of trellising or support, because your plants are going to be a little more prone to that, especially if you're growing a crop like corn. Corn does very well in deep rooted soil. It is very prone to blowing over though, if you don't have a lot for it to anchor itself. But even things like tomatoes and peppers could blow over very easily as well. So know that there's some cons with this, but you should have a really, really great start to a garden with pretty minimal upfront effort. So I hope you all learned something through this. I really hope that you enjoyed. And I guess the final thing I'd tell you too is, like I said, this is a silver lining. This is not something that I think is going to be permanent. I don't expect it to be permanent for anyone. And that's because over time, I would love people to start to experience a well-tilled garden or a well-worked garden that is either tilled through machinery or tilled through nature. Both are great, but having deep roots that go down 8, 10, 12 inches is an incredible thing for not only your garden, how much you have to water, how much healthier your plants are going to be, how much more disease resistant and drought tolerant your plants are going to be, but in a pinch, I've always said this, in a pinch, a garden is better than no garden. And so this is ultimately giving you that option to have a garden and to work with what you have. So I hope you all will try this. I hope you all have learned something, enjoyed something. And I also want to thank you all so much for being open to other possibilities, because I know there's a lot of purists out there that'll say, just do this and just be patient and don't do this. I am not a person that says don't do something. I'm a person that says try something, but work towards ideal, right? Ideal is something you aim for, not something you have immediately. And so this is gonna give you the ability to grow a garden, have fun in the garden, grow some amazing plants, grow food for your family, and ultimately grow bigger. So on that, take care, guys. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider checking this one out. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you so much for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. If you haven't subscribed yet, it's free. Consider doing that. We upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, rain or shine. And if you need any garden tools, supplies, or seeds, check out MIgardener.com. We got you covered. See you guys in the garden. Bye.